And now I'd request Professor K.G. Karmakar and Ms. Anuradha Karmakar to give their presentation.
Reload that. Thank you. Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here. There are three reasons for this. First is I would like to pay my respects to Father Bogart, whom I consider as my guru in rural development. Other two gurus being Dr. J.C. Kumarappa and Rabindranath Tagore, whom I have never met, but whose writings I have followed. Secondly, the Madhya Pradesh government deserves all respect for the tremendous help they have been giving for agriculture and the way agriculture has grown in the state at a rate of about over 5.5% for the last 3 or 4 years is creditworthy, when the all India performance is a miserable 0.2%. And the third is my active involvement over the last 5 years with the Narmada Valley Trust at Harda to have an inclusive system of rural development which is non-confrontational and tries to help farmers. Now, I'm tired of telling that India is poor. So let's start with, was India really poor before? It wasn't. Let's start with India's wealth. And if you see the slide, we have a lot to be proud of. Nature has been kind, God has been kind, and we have many blessings. For example, from 1 AD to 2030 AD, Professor Ferguson of Oxford has done a pioneering study, I think, which is very fantastic, especially as he's worked out the GDPs of all countries, and it shows that India was contributing about 25 to 35%, it varies over the years, of the world's GDP up till about say 1600. And then afterwards, with the increasing colonialism, the percentage started going down. Today we are contributing maybe about 3 to 4% to the world's GDP. It's very low. But the point I wish to make was that India was very rich, and mainly because of our non-farm sector and our exports, which were basically diamonds. We were the first and the only country in the world to have diamonds up till 1735, when Brazil started having diamonds. Now, somehow, all this has not translated into wealth. Now, you have more than 54% of the people under the BPL category. Now, this is, the government of India has different figures. If you go by the World Bank standard of $2 per day, not $1.25 per day, I think it comes to about 54% of the people under this category. But we have more than 110 million farmers in 126 agroeconomic zones, and our farmers can contribute and grow anything under the world, and anything which can be grown anywhere can also grow in India. The major problem is productivity and poverty issues. Please look at the Indian average productivity, which is going down. It's not increasing, in spite of more fertilizer use, more irrigation, but still the productivity issues have not come up. Production has increased. Productivity has come down and is coming down even further. So that is a matter of worry. And we are nowhere compared to the best in the world. Look at what the Arabs have done, Egypt. Look at Israel's production in milk. Now, what can be done about this poverty dimensions? You'll see the 2011 census data. how many people are deprived of the basic necessities of life. What can be done to improve this is high-tech but small farms which can survive and thrive, then lower transaction costs for farmers and banks for credit, inputs, infrastructure and water, then support for small farmers because 82% of the country's farmers are smallholder farmers, and the rural non-farm sector deserves, and the services sector deserves much more help to come up. You need to have clusters, you need to have area-specific investments, you need to have income generation, livelihoods, better governance, more NGOs, more CSR support, and multi-sectoral attack on poverty. Now, if we are really interested in agriculture, the question is, can agriculture be the engine for rural growth? Yes, this I would like to say, because if we can ensure that farmers get proper commodity prices, I am confident that they will be able to help the Indian economy grow at a much faster pace. But some of the statistics are appalling. I think Father Selvaraj will be giving later about the suicides of farmers. That is the stark reality. First of all, there is decline in agricultural contribution to the GDP. It's somewhere around 13 to 14%, very low, compared to 52% when as 1947. Then reduction in employment. For many years it was about 70%, now we can say it's about 55%. Cereal yields and availability have increased, but prices have fallen. Commercial structure of agriculture reflects rapid technical progress and the global commodity chains which are now coming up. We have to conform to those standards, phytosanitary conditions of the EU, and all these require a lot of investment in various forms. Now, what is the need for action? If we really believe that agriculture, which affects and large number of, and the poverty in rural areas, we have to concentrate on doing something for the rural areas. The problem is the urban-rural divide is increasing. You have almost now today a balance, 50-50 in rural and urban areas. It was expected to happen sometime in 2030s, but it has already happened in India. About 50% people are today urban-oriented. Now, will the remaining 50% who are in rural areas, will they be able to feed 100% of all of us? I think that is going to be a tall challenge unless we retain our youth in rural areas. And to retain youth in rural areas, you must provide livelihoods. You must provide job security. You must provide facilities. If you cannot provide that, it will be a problem. So the only way to create this situation where you retain youth in rural areas is to create more livelihoods and income schemes. Otherwise, the rural poverty figures go on increasing. Now look at, I do not want to enter into a debate on what is rural development, what is the definition of rural development. All that is immaterial. You have a 1975 rural development definition by the World Bank. You have 1984 by Robert Chambers, which is very comprehensive. And you have Professor Kartar Singh also, rural on development definition. But all these are just for academic interest and do not serve the purpose. What is more important is to see where are the sectoral gaps in rural development today. The government has been spending huge amounts. The Rural Development Ministry, I think, after railways and defense, have the highest budgets in the country. Huge amounts have been going into rural development. But is it translating into actual development on the ground? I think this is where we need to really think where the money is going and why is it not affecting rural development. So these are the unfinished tasks of rural development which we have to go forward. So I would like to concentrate on various approaches to rural development, and I would like to make a mention that you need block specific and district specific plans. Unless we have these, we will not go forward. big plans at the mega or at the central level, annual plans, or we already have the planning commission gone. Now we have the Niti Aayog. But what we need is micro planning at the base level. 5 years, 10 years, what are we planning to become? What do we want to become? I think that is required. It's not there today. Now, I think there was some talk on CSR. Is CSR the approach to rural development? I think we need to think, is the market the best arbiter of everything? The market is not a very fair arbiter. You do not have always the best going to where the markets necessarily want. So in rural development, this is what happens. But if you look at the market-friendly approach, on which is the CSR approach, you have two approaches. One is the MBA approach, which is single bottom line. Because that goes by what is in it that for me? Do I get any opportunity? Do I get any photo ops, or do I get a lot of publicity? That is the CSR approach. And that is the MBA approach. MSW approach is slightly different, and that concentrates on triple bottom line approach. Then physical and financial infrastructure creation, they believe is adequate, and improving human capabilities, that is the Amartya Sen approach, by hygiene, education and health initiatives. Now if you look at the CII figures, what they say is, I think the CSR initiatives are catching low-hanging fruits. They are concentrating on basically education issues. 65% of the CSR funds are going for education. About 15 to 20% is going for health, and the rest is for livelihoods and all that. So basically they are going in for low-hanging fruits. They are not concentrating on the major problem areas which exist in rural India. They want opportunities, and they want to show that they are doing really something. Now, this is, I would believe, is the NABARD method of rural development. I was in NABARD for many years, and I would like to make a mention that we believe in this type of development. The temporary organizations which can help and are basically NGOs, government agencies, corporates and cooperatives. And with the intervention process, you have a livelihoods approach, you can really do something. But along with that, you require a three-phase approach, that is livelihoods, creating sustainable jobs, you have need of rural infrastructure, and you have need of leadership. Now, look at what the government has done for livelihoods. Okay. The government has been doing a lot of things like Jan Dhan Yojana, the Digital India Initiative, Make in India, Swachh Bharat and all that. These are very positive steps to take the country forward. But these have an urban bias. Where is the rural bias in this? I think we need to concentrate on that. 10 years of jobless growth is a problem. And we have certain demographic advantages which are very important. But this Jugaad philosophy is something which we should guard against, because that manages the situation, does not help in further growth. Good is the enemy of the best. This is what my teachers have taught me. The next is, these are the creating 1 million new jobs every year. I think that is the challenge. Unless you have this as the major challenge in rural India and in urban India, this is going to be a problem. There is growth in many sectors, but what is required is not only education, but also skills upgradation. Unless you have that, it will be a problem. And we have certain things as to who is to do what. If you look at what the government has done, I think there are certain problems. Now, this is a sustainable rural livelihood model by Oxfam, created in 1975, which is even valid today. It's a very good framework, and we need to follow that. There are rural infrastructure gaps. These are huge gaps. and these require to be attended to. Unless you do that, you will not be able to give a good standard of life to the people who are living in rural areas. Then what are the other things you require for quality rural infrastructure and cost recovery mechanism? You have problems with various livelihoods and all. And what is required is Professor Dr. Kalam's initiative for Pura reforms. He wanted these physical, electrical knowledge and connectivities. Unless we have that in rural areas, it will be a problem. Now, the last and very important one is leadership. Unless we have proper leadership to bring all these things together, rural, the infrastructure and then the livelihoods approach. So, what is this leadership we are looking at? At different age levels, you have different leadership. For those who are just starting out, you have many MBA students over here. In the beginning, you must have, at the ages of 20 to 30, you must have curiosity, creativity, communications ability at the junior level. At the mid-level, competence, courage, conviction. At the senior level, at the age of 40 to 50, you need cooperation, character, common sense. And lastly, when you reach the top management levels, compassion, capability, and charisma. But the ABC of leadership is basically authenticity, the truth, the real self, being, and convergence of reality and goal. You need to have a lot of perseverance, you need to have a lot of tenacity to achieve the goals. Now before I say, I thank you, you have not disturbed me, but I have gone off track by 5 minutes. Some of the world's leaders in 1992, they got together, about 205 of them, and to put them on a common platform and to develop the Millennium Development Goals is something fantastic. But if you look at what has been achieved from these Millennium Development Goals, I must make a mention that the 7 major development goals out of the 8th one is just a coordination one. The 7 major Millennium Development Goals have almost been achieved. And for India, we have done really well. Poverty has been halved. And other things like, for example, infant mortality has come down, maternal mortality has come down, but not to the levels as we want. Hunger has not been abolished. I think these are being taken care of in the next set of goals, that is by 2030. You have the Sustainable Development Goals. You have 17 goals now. Earlier you had only 7 goals. Now you have 17 goals with 169 targets. There is a criticism of the UN Sustainable Development Goals saying that there are just too many. But the point is, everyone wanted a very comprehensive plan. They said that we must eliminate poverty by 2030. So this is a challenge before all of us, and especially in India. And I hope all the bright students and all the faculties and all the various researchers will concentrate on this task of ensuring that the Sustainable Development Goals, which have been enunciated by the UN, are actually implemented. And we need to have an India where there is no poverty by 2030. Thank you very much.